Welcome to the Sheila Mack Show, reality at its finest. Before we get started with today's episode, I would like to thank today's sponsor, and that is Ether Diamonds, the world's most sustainable diamonds and the only diamonds that are actually good for the planet. Ether creates the world's first positive impact diamonds made from air through a process that removes harmful air pollution, captures the carbon from it, and retasks the carbon to a higher purpose in their one-of-a-kind diamonds. These are 100% real diamonds with real impact. In fact, every carat of Ether diamonds offsets your personal carbon footprint for over a year. They're some of the highest quality diamonds you could buy and certified by IGI, the world's largest independent laboratory for testing and grading gemstones and fine jewelry. Now you're no longer stuck having to choose between mined and regular lab-grown diamonds, both of which harm the environment. Ether offers the only truly sustainable diamonds on the market, requiring no ethical or environmental trade-offs. They're the only guilt-free diamonds available in the world. To learn more about these revolutionary diamonds from air, visit their website at etherdiamonds.com. That's ether spelled with an AE. And follow them on social media at Ether Diamonds. AETHERDIAMONDS at Ether Diamonds. All right, and now let's go on to the show. In each person's lifetime, there will be a series of waves of rock bottom events. These times are when your identity needs a reboot. These are the sacred and historic times that offer you a chance to reinvent and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I hope that your life is always blessed and that you will never need a guide. However, if you need help, accountability, community, and connection, along with a rock-solid reboot plan, then my new book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, will be like having me by your side. It is now available on Audible, Amazon, Kindle, and includes a free mini online course, meditation, plus 11 additional guided application workbooks.
Are you ready for a reboot? Welcome to the Sheila Mack Show, reality at its finest. History reminds us those hit hardest often become the change makers. This year, we've all hit crazy economic, social, and emotional rock bottoms. We all get knocked down. Something hits globally, locally, personally. It affects our health, finances, our relationships. We have to recreate a business or career. Each show, Sheila and her special guest will be sharing their reboot stories, guiding you with real solutions to upgrade and up-level emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Here on NBC's KCAA Radio. If you're ready to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and bra straps, enjoy a listen. Here's Sheila.
Welcome to the Sheila Mack Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mack, and today we have a very special guest. And so let me see here. And this is Shahjehan Khan from Refeelian Media. Refeelian Media is a company that elevates diverse voices. His company was founded in 2020 to specifically combat the negative stereotypes of Muslims in the media. While that will remain a major focus, they also create content to help others in the minority-majority group. So now, Rifelion is based in Portland, Oregon, and after 9/11, living in the 9/11 post-America, phrases like these have become part of our cultural vocabulary, and in a way, it makes sense. It was a day that changed everything, both for Americans and people all over the world. But for those that saw themselves as even remotely Muslim, 9/11 did more than we could ever have imagined. Whether or not we liked it or not, that was the day we all became part of the Muslim world, or the American Muslim community, for better or for worse, and we really didn't get to choose what that even meant. Wow, so this is a really serious conversation, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Sheila.
Yes, and I'd love for you to share about a time in your business or personal life where you experienced a tough situation and how you got back on track.
Sure. I mean, I guess the one that comes to mind that I talk a lot about in the show as well would be getting sober. I've been sober for 10 years. About 10 years ago, yeah, it was kind of beyond time, and I had to kind of ask for help, and did that, and then took a lot of steps to kind of get and stay on that path. So, definitely sought kind of professional help. But the first step was definitely asking for it, asking for, and just like being honest.
Right. Right. Ask for help when you need it. That's somebody listening in needed to hear that. And it is okay to ask for help when you need it.
Absolutely.
Yes. And now I'd love to hear more about you. You have a podcast related to the topic of being an American Muslim and what that's like. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. So the name of the show is King of the World, which is actually what my name, Shahjehan, literally means, King of the World. Shah is king, Jahan is world. So the show is about the last 20 years since 9/11, since this is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. It follows my own personal journey through addiction and recovery, through creativity, through mental health, and also in the wider context of kind of being a Muslim in the U.S. In the last 20 years, and kind of following the historical timeline along with kind of like what was going on in my life. And so I have all sorts of incredible guests, including like historians, actors, survivors, and also like my family and my friends. And it's just a very special project, which is very dear to my heart. I've done many things in my life. I've been a touring musician. I've been an actor. And so this is kind of the most like vulnerable I've ever been, I think. So we just launched the show last Wednesday. We do a new episode every Wednesday, and I've already had some pretty incredible feedback. So very, very grateful to be sharing this story.
Yes, it's so important. And I was really blessed with living in Los Angeles, California. I had diversity, like that's just what it is. And I remember I was raised by grandparents for part of the time, and my grandmother had all these elders that came from all over, and they had come to this country for whatever situation. And it was to hear their stories was something that wisdom, and it made life happen. It wasn't a book. It wasn't just a boring book. It was, oh my gosh, that really happened, and what they experienced. And it just made me realize we all have these adventures, and behind all these stories and the political stuff or something that happened is a whole group of people that somebody puts it in a category of this or that, and they have an idea, a stereotype that is ridiculous, but it's something that happens, and it happens to many people and many cultures, and everybody's got a name for something, but it doesn't change that we're all people, humans, looking at each other, loving each other. And if we can get past the stereotypes and see the people, it's so much better. The world is better that way. So I'd love to hear some of your stories and experiences around.
Yeah, so sure. And hopefully the show is done in that sort of a way. Like, it's an audio podcast, but it's done in kind of a narrative style with really, really cool sound design, music and stuff. Like I got to do the theme song. I have an amazing team at Rifelion. So Rifelion is my friend Asad Butt, his company that he started in Portland. We're kind of childhood friends from the same community. And towards the end of last year, he has another show, American Muslim Project, where he had me as a guest. And he was at the end of the show, he was like, I'm taking this risk next year. I'm starting this company. I've always wanted to start this media company. I've been watching your career in music and stuff. Like, would you want to maybe like be a part of it and host your own show? And I said, absolutely, 100% yes. And then we kind of were toying with the idea of like, what should we do? And initially, it was this year, as I mentioned, is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And initially, as a lot of like American Muslims are kind of sick of talking about 9/11, because one thing that happened on that day is that all of a sudden, overnight, the most important thing about us became the fact that we were Muslim, and kind of like every other part of who we were as human beings, like, was
Mm.
all of a sudden very like less important. So the show is a lot about a lot of stuff. It's about, the first episode is about the day, kind of what I was doing. I was a senior in high school. I was about to turn eight. I was a month away from turning 18. So it starts with like me and my best friend Eric in my parents' minivan on the way to high school, what was going on.
Mm.
And then kind of chronicles through that day, just where I was. I was a senior. As I said, I was a senior. I was in my calculus class, and, just kind of going over what happened. Also, my parents are from Pakistan. My family's from Pakistan. I was born in the U.S. and stuff, but my cousins and aunt happened to be visiting from Pakistan. So we talked about that sort of stuff, and then basically the very next day, some kind of like not so nice things happened to me in high school. A few kids were kind of mean to me and stuff, and so we look at that day in the wider context of, how did it, whether I liked it or not, it kind of shaped the trajectory of the rest of my life, and from there I became, eventually I would go into music and activism and stuff like that. But that's like episode one, and then each episode has a few kind of experts and guests, peppered with like hearing from like my family and stuff. And I have two younger sisters, my friends, my bandmate, we have a comedian, we have a Muslim soldier that talks about what it was like to like be a soldier in Iraq and be like a Muslim soldier. We have someone who was a survivor of like a pretty vicious hate crime a few days after 9/11. We have folks that talk about what it was like to be under surveillance from the government just for being Muslim, talking about like being at the airport while Muslim, how much that has been not that great of an experience in the last 20 years. We also have an episode dedicated to, there's this big conversation these days about, and it has been for some time, I don't want to just say these days, but about, representation in the media and film and TV, and just kind of like, how in this particular case, how Muslims are portrayed, and where we kind of have stood traditionally in Hollywood. So we talked to a couple of actor friends of mine. And so I think it's like a really interesting, an interesting way to look at this story, because there's obviously like there's a lot that's out there about 9/11, but I think that adding my own sort of like personal journey to it is what really like makes it unique. And yeah, I feel so fortunate to be able to like given the space to tell this story, and it's been very therapeutic. We actually, speaking of that, we also talked to like a psychiatrist, just about like how it, in her words, it 9/11 just changed the entire definition of Muslim mental health and stuff. So I'm really very, very proud of how this show turned out.
Yes. Wow. That's so interesting. And that makes sense. And here we're in another time where we also have shifts with this COVID, and we have people taking
Right.
sides and fighting one another and blaming this person or that person, or political sides, or mask, no mask, vax, no mask. It's like, oh my gosh, we're becoming more and more divided in a time when, holy smokes, the whole world needs to come together in community to have the freedom from this virus and to be safe. And so it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense in the mind, but this is what people react when they're
Right.
scared. When they're in fear,
Absolutely.
they
Yeah.
go to a defensive mode. And
Yeah, and that's another big topic of ours, is just kind of the fear, and whether you call it Islamophobia, you call it anti-Muslim bigotry, or whatever, just that climate of fear, and just what it was like to like be Muslim, like during that time. So definitely one of them.
So for you, what was that like? Like over the years, what was it like to be a practicing Muslim in America post 9/11? What was that like?
Yeah. So, I mean, even so, like, yeah, I mean, it was like, as I mentioned, so I guess I can just give you this one example. So for me, the very next day, so 9/12, I went back to school in the morning, And these three kids kind of cornered me, and they just asked me directly, "What did your people do?"
Wow.
And now I didn't. I was very confused because I am like a lot of first generation people. Like I'm born here. I do technically like quote unquote come from somewhere else, but like who is it? Who are my people? Like what is? And so and I think for me specifically, from that day forward, it was a cognitive dissonance of sorts. That kind of like, and when you're a young person anyway, and you're like in high school, I don't know about anybody else, but like I was just trying to figure out who the hell I was and stuff. And so to then just like have this added thing thrown on top of it, it didn't really get any easier, and then we also kind of jump right into, like the war on terror and like the war in Iraq and stuff, and just all these, things that we're actually kind of seeing the effects of now. I mean, we've been seeing them all along, but even with what's been going on more recently with our kind of like our defeat in Afghanistan and stuff like that. So just kind of like seeing sort of history repeat itself as far as like, it's just any things that happen sort of like, it's like stuff happens over there and there's like, it's like those people quote unquote over there. And like, it's very like decontextualized. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And so my attempt in the show is to put things a little bit more simply so that people can kind of like be like, oh, well, this is, like for example, like we talked to somebody who spent a lot of time in Afghanistan and Iraq. And just she talks about how like her friends who were like in school, like my mom used to go to Afghanistan when she was a kid in the 50s and 60s and stuff. And so these are like real places. They're dynamic places with complex people, just like anywhere else. So I think for me, just, the main thing would probably be an oversimplification of like who I am supposedly from, or, even just like to be like a Muslim, like what does that even mean? There's like millions of us, like all over the place, and we're not just like one way, or we're not just like from one area,
Right.
so yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now, there's so many different religions, and the beauty of that is that when you study the religions, and this is something I learned when I was training to be a Waldorf teacher, and I did become a teacher there. But Rudolf Steiner believed that each child was brought into this world somehow with the whatever was intended, that religion, that family, that culture, that was part of who knows, the guiding, whatever, and that's part of the experience. And when we understand all the different religions and different people and how they live and what their values are, the religion is so much a part of your values.
And I mean, I think it's also, like in terms of education, I mean, I didn't learn anything about Islam in high school. I didn't know that Islam has been here since, I mean, it was brought with, many people say that between 10 to 50 million slaves that were brought from Africa were Muslim.
Yeah.
So Islam is American, it's like as American as anything else. And we just don't learn a lot of these very base, or, any sort of context about like anything really. We just kind of like learn that, I don't know, it was just this thing that happened, and then we just sort of concentrate on Europe and stuff. And so, at least for me in my high school, I'm trying to like, so we just kind of like we don't learn that much. So we don't have a frame of reference, basically.
Yes, so. Yes, it's different. And coming from LA, I had this beautiful, diverse group of women that were my grandmother's friends. And they came from all over, and they had these incredible stories and adventures. And I got to know them beyond the story of just a history book. It was, oh my gosh, but I love this person. How could another group not like this person? or and all the people were diverse and different, but it was like, when you hear what they went through, then you can connect, and it made it matter.
Mm-hmm.
It made it matter so much more to me to learn about history, to study religions, and learn about different things. It made it real and important.
Yeah, and that's been one of the coolest parts so far in the last week since the first episode came out is actually I've heard from so I did not grow up in a very diverse place at all. We were basically the only I was maybe one of 3 or 4 brown kids, in my whole town at the time. I think it's changed since then, but so I've actually gotten messages from people that I went to high school with, definitely some obviously my friends and stuff, but others that I didn't like know as well that are just like, hey, like, this really gave me something to think about, as far as like, we grew up in the same town and stuff. And wow, like I'm just I'm not shocked, but just kind of like, yeah, you could tell that it was maybe a really important experience for them to have as well. So that's definitely something that interests me and kind of like definitely sharing this and having people share this with people that I might not otherwise have access to for sure.
Yes. Yes. And one of the things that I did early on was I traveled for 7 years straight with my youngest two. I adopted, so I have 6 kids. So
Oh,
this
wow.
first group of children that are now grown. But my youngest two were teens, and I got to the point where I sold my gift stores and I wanted to travel and bring them along. And we went all over the world. So,
Wow.
I remember getting off at the airport in Dubai, and everybody had the prayer time, and you could hear
Mhm.
the chanting, and it was
Yeah, yeah.
beautiful magic. I was like, oh my gosh, it's incredible. And you could just feel this beautiful energy. And we got to meet people from all over the world. We went to India and stayed with the monks. I mean, it was such a beautiful journey for us and such an important experience. I don't know, maybe I'm a millennial before my time because I was like, let's just travel and have fun and learn as we go. And so that's what we did, and 7 years straight. So it really made it different for us. And now we're traveling in a different way because there's so many restrictions. So we're online and we're sharing our stories. And I think it's bringing the world closer
Hmm.
in a good way. It
Yeah,
really
I
is.
mean that's the cool thing about, being able to, I'm recording this. Like we're lucky to have a whole team and have like a really good kind of professional production team. But I'm recording the voiceovers here at home. I got a little closet studio, and like we're able to upload it, stream it, and you can get it like wherever you get your podcasts and stuff like that. But yeah, you're totally right. And in terms of I'm still a person that's in like long term recovery, so I've found myself at at virtual meetings and stuff all over the place too. So you're right. It's definitely like and I'm still a pretty active musician and stuff. So in terms of like collaborating with people, yeah, it's been a weird time, but it's definitely like a time to like reflect and just think about like what are the things you like really want to do and how can you do them better for sure.
Yes. Now, I interviewed a guest on the show a few weeks ago that wrote a book, and he took different messages from different wisdom texts, so the Quran and the Bible and the everything, and he brought them all together and he would compare on a topic.
Oh yeah.
And and there were certain things that almost every single one had the same kind of advice or guidance
Right.
for people. And so it was like,
Mhm.
oh, there's something that's connected that really, I mean, I'm listening to the wisdom text. I'm like, okay, they say not to do this, and we got 5 different religions that believe it's not good. And then you go ahead and you hear about it scientifically, it has problems that could make you sick. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just not going to do that. I'm good. I feel like they probably know more than I do, and so I'm going with that wisdom. And I think that's really important, to stick with that,
Yeah.
to honor the wisdom and not just say, okay, something happened, 9/11 happened. Not
Mhm.
every single person that's Muslim was involved with this, and
Right.
whatever. And it's just that's not it. And it's a difficult thing. And I think more open discussions. People are afraid to talk
Mhm.
or ask questions, or um, they don't want to be offensive or whatever. So what would you say for people that are kind of like unsure about how to just connect with people, Muslim Americans,
after
I
all
mean,
this
yeah,
divine.
yeah, I guess it's I don't, it's hard to kind of like I don't want to like try to speak on behalf of like all of
Yeah.
us, you know, because this show, for example, it's just like my story in the whole thing. But it's like anything else, like, you know, you have to like be okay with sitting in discomfort, I think, you know, like you can't just um but yeah, I mean, I think Google exists now. So it's like pretty easy to like at least have like a base level of like knowledge about something, you know, like
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, definitely, yeah, I mean, it's yeah, for sure. I think having conversations and getting out of our little like bubbles and silos is totally important. And yeah, I hope that, you know, this show can like help with that and just maybe begin to like be the point of like curiosity for some people, you know, that and that was our hope, was to kind of try to frame it in a more of like an accessible way, you know, and
Mhm.
like to make it more of like a human, like you were saying, like a human story, rather sort of like beyond, like including the major headlines, but sort of beyond them, and like who are the people, you know, that
Mhm.
this sort of stuff actually happened to. So I
Right.
hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. And now you talk about how you recovered and you're no longer drinking alcohol, and
Mhm.
that's another serious road. I actually wrote an entire chapter on
Oh wow.
breaking free from addictions, and
Hmm.
it is a difficult one. I mean, I don't drink. I never could. I have sugar stuff. So
Hmm.
I've been really protected, I guess, because I don't know, something, the universe, God, source said, hey, you know what? This one could be an alcoholic too. So we just won't let her. Yeah. And so I and so I really can't. I get sick. And so what I have
Yeah.
to do is say no all the time. And I still, and even with the health thing, I have to explain myself.
Yeah.
People are always, oh, well, just one drink, it won't hurt. It's
Hmm.
like, no, you don't know that it will hurt me. and and
Yeah.
so how do you deal with that kind of pressure? And it's such a social thing.
I think it's more so. My thing actually was mainly cannabis, not. I mean, I did drink when it was around, and I drank too much and stuff. But my thing was mainly cannabis, which is a whole other interesting discussion.
Yeah.
I think that in general, the stigma around you know, substance misuse or whatever, you know, being in recovery, or any whatever label you put on it, has definitely like gotten a little bit easier in the recent. I think it's more, I guess, quote unquote, whatever normal means. It's more normal to be like, yeah, I have a therapist, or yeah, I do this and that. I think that you know, I'm very fortunate that the first people I was really honest with were my parents, and they, you know, they were like very, because it's not, you know, and this isn't just because they're like from Pakistan or they're Muslim or whatever. They're just from a generation where you like don't really like talk about
Right.
that kind of stuff openly, and that's not real, you know, that's true of lots of different people. So I think when it was definitely a hard it was a hard conversation, but they've always been like my strongest support from day one.
Mm.
um but then, you know, and I also, you know, and I'm also, there's a lot of different contextual things. They're like, I'm super fortunate I was in a suburb, you know, like I didn't grow up in a place, I maybe didn't look in a certain way, you know. I definitely like drove around and like smoked weed and stuff in my car like very freely in the suburbs, and had I been born in a different place, I could have very easily been thrown in jail for like the rest of my life or something.
Right.
So I had a series of like fortunate, you know, not that I didn't have struggles and stuff in life, but I'm very aware of the opportunities that I had, and like when I was ready to kind of like, I guess, I don't want to maybe take control, or just kind of like accept defeat. Maybe that's better, better way
Mm.
of looking at it. So I was able to kind of like deal with that stuff. But no, it's never easy. I mean, I think that it's been 10 years, so I sometimes forget that I'm like the conversation that you and I are even having right now. I have these conversations all the time.
Mhm.
So I remember even the show that I just released last week, it was really tough for a lot. I remember like a couple people were like, am I gonna like cry during this show more? Because I cried during that episode. I was like, well, I guess, yeah, you might. Yeah, you're right. Because I'm so used to like these kinds of conversations that sometimes it's, and I'm not, you know, I know that like for some of them, when I went back and I listened, I also like was kind of like, whoa, that was like pretty
Mhm.
heavy, and you know, thinking about like the kind of stuff that I went through. But yeah, it's not an easy thing, but you just have to kind of put yourself out there. I definitely think that like honesty in all its forms is like the only way to do it.
Yes, and I think that now with the legalization of
Yeah.
marijuana, it's a little bit more social and difficult still compared to the way it was when it was not a legal thing. And
Yeah.
maybe it was legal when you got addicted or into this. How did this show up
Yeah.
in your life?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not, it's hard to know whether it was, a maladaptive coping mechanism. Like I'm not like, it's not that just because I can't do it, I don't think people, I'm like all for it. If you are like getting off of opiates and now you're on like that's cool with me, man. But like for me personally, as a person with an addictive personality or someone who was prone to anxiety and depression, I was just somebody for whom it just made it worse. And it's kind of like all I did and all I could do. And it just made me a very like closed person and just very kind of, I guess closed off from the world and just sort of like shrunk down a little bit. So it was hard to admit that, I think, specifically because it was like, oh, it's just weed, man. Like, what are you talking about? So.
Yeah. Well, when I was growing up, it was illegal.
Yeah. Yes, it's a whole other thing.
It was a bigger deal. And
Yeah.
actually in my book, I have a whole chapter on how my kids got caught driving with a bunch of pot in the car right after getting licensed and to do probation and all this interesting stuff. And that's why they ended up traveling with me. I traveled for 7 years around the world, and I brought the young two with me because I was like, well, you're going to boarding school or you're coming with me because you're not hanging out with those kids anymore.
I gotcha.
And that's what we did. And it was a good thing that I did that. And the judge was like, okay, and they erased the record, whatever.
Yeah.
But, and then it's legal.
Yeah, which I'm a complete proponent of. I think all drugs should be legal, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, so. And so it's difficult in the sense that there are people that have addictive personalities, or it could be a gateway, and it has to be just like alcohol. It's something that can be abused. Anything can be abused, really, when you think about it. And so it's very important to use caution.
Right.
I actually had another friend that
statistically, though, alcohol is much worse.
Yes,
much worse.
Oh, very
much,
dangerous.
much worse. Yeah.
And I had a friend who had a daughter that ended up in the emergency room, and the organs were shutting down because of too much marijuana. And they didn't even know there was such a thing. There is such a thing.
The first time I've ever heard of that, but yeah.
And I don't know, there was a big name. It was a medical name, so you can all look it up, but I don't remember the name of it. And her daughter survived and is fine now. But that's scary because we don't know. And guess what? Alcohol, kids go to college and then they have this drinking fest and they're trying to get into the sororities and they died because they overdosed on alcohol. So it can happen. Yeah,
that's the only thing that you can die from withdrawal. Alcohol is the only drug from whom's or whatever's withdrawal that you can actually die from. So
yeah. So it was really, so that's where I am sure they didn't know. These young people, the girl that there's a limit here,
right?
Or maybe you have so much and then you don't even know what you've had anymore. So that's really important. And yet there's the other side of it where, like you said, the freedom part, where if you have a health issue, and I know I've got CBD oil somewhere around here for my right knee,
right.
And that it really helps with a lot of medical situations or just people that have control.
Right.
So what would you advise people to do who feel like either they themselves or maybe someone they really love, child, an adult, is really gone to that other side, over the edge, where it's become an addiction, it's taking over their life?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. That's there's concrete steps you could. I mean, they always suggest to kind of like try to approach the person with love, not from a place of judgment. To try to wait until they're like not, drunk or high or something. it's very important to seek the support for yourself, number one, so there's all sorts of different groups you can go to that are for folks like that, whether it's like Al-Anon or something like that, but because it's just helpful to like talk to other people that have been through it, for sure. But yeah, I definitely would still, even though I'm not as much of a like a 12-step person myself, if the person is willing, to be able to maybe go to like some kind of a meeting or something with them. Because I think the most important thing about it is to sort of build a community around it, to like learn that, yeah, there's lots of people that like go through this stuff, and that you can like have life like without it. Like I do everything. I'm still in a touring rock band. I tour all over the world. I do all sorts of things, but it's because I took the time and to like take care of myself that I'm able to like do all this stuff now. That there is definitely like life after recovery and stuff, but it kind of has to be the most important thing in your life.
Would you say it's an all or nothing situation?
Not so much. I think it's tough because I think that I personally don't think that, for example, like AA and NA, I think they were extremely helpful for me. I went to meetings every day for 2-3 years, but I don't think that they should be mandated as treatment because they're not scientific treatment. I think they should be presented as an option. I think that for some people, moderation is an option. I think that that's okay. I think the all or nothing can be. It's a tough thing, right? Because it's like, part of changing any behavior is that like you kind of have to do stuff you don't want to do, right? So but at the same time, it's important to not shame anybody for like messing up, for sure. So I think that I would still advocate for someone to try, and I think that, let's just be honest, like some meetings are not as great as others. Some people are not as great as others. But I definitely have found some of the most like wonderful, supportive, like lifelong friends in specifically maybe 12-step rooms, but other kinds of recovery circles as well. So definitely having like a social network, trying to find someone with whom you can be accountable that's not you. That's really important. And whether for you that looks like a therapist or a fellow person in recovery or something like that. Yeah. So there's lots of options out there. It's just tough to, I think, get real with yourself sometimes. And sometimes it can help to kind of like be the one voice for somebody that's like, look, I love you, but this is like causing me a problem, or I can't watch you do this type thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It is hard. Sometimes you have to,
right.
My kids have had to walk away from friends that are getting into some serious drugs, and they're like, I can't be a friend anymore because I can't.
Right. No, and I mean, I was that friend, so
Yeah.
I mean, and now I'm somebody that I guess, parents approach, even other friends of mine that have recently kind of like gotten sober and stuff, have just kind of, and I've realized later on that it's more through my actions and less through my words that people have, they can see it in my face, if they haven't seen me in a few years, and they're like, wow, man, you look pretty happy now. What's different? So
good. Yeah. That's wonderful. Yes. Yeah. And I'd love for you to share, we're coming to the end of our talking time.
Sure.
I'd love for you to share how people can connect, listen to your show.
Sure. Yeah. So again, the show is called King of the World. You can just put that into whatever podcast thing you use, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. It's everywhere. And the company is Refeelion Media. That's RIF like father, ELION like Nancy, Refeelion. And yeah, please just listen to the show. Please subscribe to it. And more importantly than that, if you could just share it with like one person, if you hear the trailer and you still don't want to listen to it, then you can, whatever. But I really think it's an incredible show, and it's just like people from all walks of my life, and it's just the reaction that I've gotten from it has been absolutely incredible. So I'd really love for you to check it out.
Thank you. All right. And for those tuning in, we'll be back after these messages. Stay tuned. Thank you again for being a guest on the show.
Thank you for having me, Sheila. Really appreciate it.
If you are just tuning in, this is NBC's Sheila Mack Show here on KCAA Radio, the station that leaves no listener behind. I'm your host, Sheila Mack, and today I have a couple of announcements. First, I would like to hear from you. That's right. I would love to hear from you, to be honest. I want to know what your breakthrough is, what your reboot is. How are you reinventing and rebooting your life? What shows would you like to hear more of? What information do you need to help you get back on track this year? And to do that, the best way to connect with me is actually through my new YouTube channel, and that is Sheila Mac Show on YouTube. And there you can see past recordings, and you can also see other information and shares that I have. And I would love for you to share in the comments there what you're needing more of and what you're rebooting this year and how we can help you get back on track. I don't want to see you hurt yourself. I'm not going to help you hurt yourself. I will support your efforts to love yourself. If you're not the one with the addiction, you have the choice of how to show up. You're teaching people how to show up for you by how you show up for them and for yourself. What if the addiction isn't to drugs or alcohol? We focused a lot on addictions to drugs or alcohol, but what if it's something different? What if it's an addiction to gambling, to cigarettes, or an eating disorder? The concept is going to be the same, but the treatment is different. There are certain levels of a relationship where you might step in. Maybe you can keep your loved one active and give them fun things to do that take them out of the place they use addiction to escape. You're doing something to get them out of that mental state or place of feeling down that brings them to that addiction sometimes. What can you change in the addictive pattern? You're not saying, hey, let's stop shopping. Instead, it might be, hey, let's take a road trip. Let's go to the gym. Let's go dancing. Then you're taking them away from it and replacing it with something as a couple, as a parent, or as a friend. You're redirecting the focus without having the discussion about shopping. Then they're having fun and they didn't have to face that issue for a while. Compliment them on things that are real. Not a fake compliment, but a real heartfelt compliment on the positive things. Positive reinforcement helps them keep wanting to do whatever earned that compliment. Nobody wants to be criticized. Constructive criticism, especially when someone's in a place of going into an addiction as a coping mechanism for everything else that's going on in their life, is not really helpful. They don't need you to throw a rock at them right now. They're already hurting. You see that they're hurting. Give them a hand and help them up. Get them out of that mental state. Go do something else. Let them see that it's coming from love, so they feel only love. If you have a relationship that allows for an open conversation about the addiction, you can say, hey, if you start going down that road again, what can I do to help you? Maybe you can come up with a code word, or they can tell you something to do or not do. Then you know how to support them through the rough spots without being overbearing. Then you can say, remember that we had that talk? I see you're going down there, and you said to do these things, so I'm doing them. If you want me to stop, I will, but I'm going to support you this way. That takes a lot of the judgment out. You don't think you're better than them because you don't have that addiction. And you're not telling them not to do it because you know better. It's just, I'm here and I'm going to support you as best I can. That helps you and your loved one reach the desired outcome a lot faster. Applying the Boots formula to addiction. I once worked with a very successful businessman named Ben, a friend of a friend, who hid his extreme alcoholism for years. Eventually, however, it caught up with him. He got into a car accident, totaled his car, got charged with a DUI, and lost his license. After that, he didn't hide his drinking as much, and during a days-long binge, he fell into a pool and almost drowned. His friend came to me afraid that Ben was going to die. Ben's addiction was threatening his life. Being. Ben first had to acknowledge who he was being, an alcoholic. He needed a reboot instead of another rehab because he wanted to redefine his identity and become functional again. If he didn't want to change, nobody could make him. He had to be willing to take these steps. So who are you being if you are the one with an addiction? Or who are you going to be when you're showing up for this person suffering from an addiction? You first have to admit that there's a problem before you can begin walking through it. When you start to show up again, the people around you see a different person showing up, and they see the effort. It brings that positive healing to everybody around you. And as you inspire them, they can re-inspire you as you see people in your life choosing to make a change or pick up healthier habits. That's a healthy cycle that reinforces the change you made. Orientation. Ben had to acknowledge that his addiction owned him. He had to confront how many times he put himself or others in danger. He had to look at how much money his drinking had cost and what the cost was in health, quality of life, safety, and how other people perceived him. Ben had to own up to that before he could switch roles. He also had to acknowledge the good parts of himself, his intelligence and good business sense when he was sober, and all the people his company helped. Then he had to say, this is what I would like for my business, my family, and myself. Where are you in your life, and how can you take ownership of your situation? When you make a mistake or something doesn't go right or you get a surprise, you can be honest about that too. People really appreciate that and can support you through falling off that horse or wagon, which will happen. In life, there are going to be challenges, and how you show up through them is huge. People are going to support you when you're willing to be open and honest. When you don't hide anything, it's easier to get the help you need quickly to get back on track easily. Order of operations. Once Ben knew what his life currently looked like and how he wanted it to change, he figured out the steps to get from point A to point B. The first step was to clean up his environment. He invited his friends and family to his dumping party, and we dumped many dollars worth of very expensive booze down the drain. He was honest with people about where he wanted to go, and he asked them for their support. They agreed not to cover for him, to help him set boundaries, and to model healthy behavior. What are the steps you need to take to replace your addiction with a healthier alternative? What are the steps you need to put in place to set boundaries and model healthy behavior for a friend or loved one with an addiction? Thinking. Ben had to change his thinking, too. He had to be honest and think differently about his life while giving himself credit for his successes. When he had a setback, he asked, how do I change that? What do I need to do differently next time? Who do I need to talk to get support on this? So how can you change your mindset? How can you think differently about yourself and what you want your life to look like? If you can see the end of the addiction, then you can live into it. Stepping up. Ben stepped up into a big change, and that was the moment he saved his own life. We all have challenges every day. When you step up and face these challenges, you show yourself and everyone around you that you are in control of your life. So step into taking care of yourself, loving yourself, and empowering yourself to be the best you can be. From addiction rock bottom to moment of empowerment. Maggie hit a literal rock bottom. People were concerned she would end up homeless and lost, unsure if she would live or die. Her friends and family did an intervention and got her into rehab, which cost a lot of money but got her back on her feet. It took a couple of years and a few backslides. She would get better and then fall off the wagon and have to go through the whole process again. But each successive time, she didn't fall as deep and it didn't last as long. Maggie finally went to university, graduated, and got a good job. She never returned to that low point in her life. Reboot activity. Free yourself from addictions. We all either face or know someone who has faced addiction. The following is some additional information that may help you or loved ones take back your power and rebuild your life. Excessive alcohol use can increase a person's risk of developing serious health problems, in addition to those issues associated with intoxication behaviors and alcohol withdrawal symptoms. Tobacco use and smoking do damage to nearly every organ in the human body, often leading to lung cancer, respiratory disorders, heart disease, stroke, and other illnesses. Marijuana has not only immediate effects like distorted perception, difficulty problem solving, and loss of motor coordination, but also effects with long-term use such as respiratory infection, impaired memory, and exposure to cancer-causing compounds. Opioids, including prescription drugs such as hydrocodone, oxycodone, morphine, and codeine, reduce the perception of pain, but can also produce drowsiness, mental confusion, euphoria, nausea, constipation, and depending upon the amount of drug taken, can depress breathing. Opioid misuse represents a unique challenge. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, an average of 130 Americans die every day from an opioid overdose. As people use opioids repeatedly, their tolerance increases and they may not be able to maintain the source for the drugs. This can cause them to turn to illegal sources for these drugs and even switch from prescription drugs to cheaper and more risky substances like heroin. These substances vary in purity and strength, which increases the risk of serious medical complications or overdose. It's not worth the risk, ever. There are many medically supervised programs to help a person to reduce and then get off these drugs completely. While many can benefit from using these medications to manage pain, prescription drugs are frequently misused. If you ever have to take prescription medications for pain, make sure you take the lowest dose possible. Alternative pain management options can be used along with regular medication. Some people have had great success using arnica cream and homeopathic pills to reduce pain and swelling. This always must be discussed with your doctor first to ensure it will not have a side effect with any prescriptions or other treatment methods you're using. Acupuncture, chiropractic, earthling mats for sleeping, and physical therapy may be great additions to a healing program and are a good way to help with pain management control. Quiz to see if you or a loved one may have a drug or alcohol addiction.
Are you ready to make more money in your business by telling your heartfelt, vulnerable story? Hi, I'm Leanne Clune from Radiant Books, and join me on the Sheila Mack Show, where I'm going to talk about making more income, impact, and creating a legacy by sharing your story in a highly leveraged collaboration book, sparking unlimited possibilities for you and your business. Leanne Clune, Radiant Books. See you then.
All right, and tomorrow Leanne will be our special guest on the show. It will air both at 5 a.m. and at noon. You can visit KCAAradio.com to listen in via radio or on-demand TV. I look forward to seeing
Grab a
you
copy
then.
of my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action.
Bootstraps and Bra Straps, now available on Amazon, Audible, and wherever fine books are sold. And now a message from our sponsor. And I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's show, King of the World Podcast. Although it's been 20 years since the events of 9/11, many of us can still remember it like it was yesterday. America and the world has never been the same. From Refeelian Media, the King of the World podcast series explores the many repercussions of the day for the American Muslim community through the journey of host Shahjehan Khan, a high school senior at the time. Follow his story along the major headlines, as well as hearing directly from folks who might help you understand what the hell happened on that day and in the years that followed. This 7-part series delves into September 11th in a unique and accessible way, covering topics like identity, belonging, mental health, and addiction alongside the related events of the last 20 years, including Islamophobia, the war on terror, surveillance, media representation, and resilience. King of the World, an American Muslim story told by American Muslims.